This is Makenna Green, Baylor Herlehy, and Sami Seitzinger's Heroes Project.
We interviewed Hada.
She went through multiple Japanese internment camps during World War II.
World War II began on September 1st, 1939, and was caused by the political takeover of Germany by the Nazi Party, led by Adolf Hitler. Later, in 1941, Japan allied with the Nazi Party, when Japan tried to take over part of China in order to support their growing country.
In July 1940, Germany began bombing Britain, and in June 1941, Germany invaded the Soviet Union.
Then on December 7, 1941, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, and the U.S. declared war on Japan.
Around 30 countries were involved in this war.
The Axis powers were the people who fought against the Allied powers. The Axis powers include Germany and Japan. The Allied powers include the U.S., Canada, China, and many more.
During World War II, there were mass deaths of civilians. In total, it was estimated that 50 million to about 85 million fatalities occurred.
After the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor in 1941, Americans were scared of the Japanese Americans.
All Japanese American people were treated as if they were the cause of the bombing.
First, the Japanese felt small amounts of racism, but as the war progressed, they started to be referred to as Japs, and some stores never let them enter the premises.
On February 19, 1942, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, ordering all people of Japanese ancestry to be sent to one of the many internment camps near their home.
Over 110,000 people of Japanese ancestry were sent to these camps, mostly on the West Coast. The conditions in the camps were awful.
All these camps had limited resources. They had little food and clean water. There was also limited medical supplies. The cleanliness of the camp was terrible, and people had little to no privacy.
Although many people survived these camps, the conditions were not suitable living environments.
When the Japanese Americans had to leave their homes, they could only bring what they could carry, and most of their belongings had to be left behind.
Many people would return to their homes to find them raided, destroyed, and anything of value taken.
Well, I was born in Newcastle on April 12, 1932, at home on a ranch. When World War II began, I was 9 years old, but when we had to leave for our first camp, which was called a relocation center, it was in May of 1942, and I had just become 10 in April. We were allowed to take only what we could carry. So most of us, were carrying suitcases probably, and mostly clothing. We were more fortunate than some others, I know, as our friends Al and Margaret Saladana in Newcastle, and also the owner of our ranch, so they were my father's boss. They stored many of our possessions and saved them for us. Many other Japanese had their household items, vehicles, cars, etc., stolen, and some even had their houses burned. I can't recall understanding why we were leaving home. My parents hardly, if ever, spoke about that period of time. In fact, it was an embarrassment, to be in prison like criminals when we had done nothing wrong, and we were shamed. So I learned other adults, never wanted to talk about that shameful experience. So all I can remember is that it was very hot and ripe with mosquitoes because we had netting over our beds. And I hated the shots, too. Then the second camp, Tule Lake, in Northern California, was really isolated, and I think it was in an old lake bed near the Oregon border. And I remember the sandstorms when we had to close the windows because sand was always coming in. And there was a lot of wind, sand, and I can remember the scorpions. There were scorpions everywhere.